Are you looking at live pictures right now inside the room? This will be where just a few minutes from now, President Obama will speak to the White House Correspondents Association, making fun of each and every one of them and maybe people beyond that room. And then we'll hear from Larry Wilmore, the host of The Nightly Show on Comedy Central. He will get his turn to take on the president and everyone else in that room as well. Welcome back to CNN's live coverage of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. This is a tradition that started almost 100 years ago. Here's a trivia question for you. Who was the first president to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Tweet us, and we'll tell you if you're right in a little bit. Meanwhile, let's take a look back at some of the best moments from presidents past.
We're both pleased to be here. This is also the night of the Kremlin Correspondents' Dinner in Moscow. That's when the members of the Soviet media gather to laugh at Gorbachev's jokes. Or else. Although I've been around for a while, I can remember when a hot story broke and the reporters would run in yelling, "Stop the chisels." But you all have given me some problems at home. Nancy's taken to watching the press conferences, and now every time I answer a question, she says, "I have a follow-up." And what's all that talk about a breakdown of White House communications? How come nobody told me? Well, I know this. I've laid down the law, though, to everyone there from now on about anything that happens, that no matter what time it is, wake me, even if it's in the middle of a cabinet meeting.
Speaking of real-life drama, I'm so glad that Senator McCain is back tonight. I welcome him especially. As you all know, he just made a difficult journey back to a place where he endured unspeakable abuse at the hands of his oppressors, the Senate Republican caucus. This is a special night for me for a lot of reasons. Jay Leno's here. Now, no matter how mean he is to me, I just love this guy. Because together, we give hope to gray-haired, chunky baby boomers everywhere.
So I want to talk about some serious issues, such as... Okay. Here it comes. Nuclear proliferation. Nuclear proliferation. Nuclear proliferation. Nuclear proliferation. For 8 years as vice president, Dick has ridden shotgun. That's probably not the best analogy. But he is a dear friend, and he's been the greatest straight man in the history of the world. Dick, I don't know what I would have done for material without you. And so the city slicker asked the old guy how to get to the nearest town. And
Not that old joke. Not again. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been attending these dinners for years and just quietly sitting there. Well, I've got a few things I want to say for a change. One night after George went to bed, Lynn Cheney, Condi Rice, Karen Hughes, and I went to Chippendales. I wouldn't even mention it, except Ruth Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor saw us there. I won't tell you what happened, but Lynn's Secret Service code name is now Dollar Bill.
I love the band, and so I'm going to say my farewell to you by doing something I've always wanted to do.
It's some good stuff. Listening from presidents going back as far as Ronald Reagan. Of course, the first president to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner was Calvin Coolidge. We did not find the footage. We looked for hours and hours. We could not find any of Cal's jokes right there. But we saw Reagan, we saw George W. Bush, we saw Bill Clinton there. Liz, it's really interesting to see these guys, let their proverbial hair down.
I think Rich Little hosted that one as well.
The Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Fun fact. Hashtag fun fact. It really is. I mean, as much as I disagreed with George Bush, that moment when George Bush and George Bush's id were on stage, it was one of the funniest things ever. I laughed really hard at that.
And I gotta say, as corny as it is, and it wasn't a joke to see the president conducting the band, but there's something sort of fun about that as well.
It really is. It humanizes them. Because we forget, we see them all the time, the presidential seal behind them. And we also forget so much of the speech tonight will be the president making fun of himself. And I agree with that W bit was so beautiful. That's why a lot of people love W. They may have disagreed with a lot of his policies, but he can always make fun of himself, which is endearing.
And he used it, too. I covered him for a lot of years, and he knew that expectations were so low at sometimes, all he had to do is come out and speak in complete sentences. This is what he would say to me, and people would think, he was, rising above the bar or a genius right there. It's interesting. I want to take us down a notch right here. The relationship between the press and the president has changed over the years. If you look back in history, there are presidents. FDR used to joke with the press. He would have cocktails with the press. They would rub shoulders. Lyndon Johnson was friends with a lot of reporters as well. That's just not the case right now. President Obama keeps the press at arm's length, and by arm's length, that only counts if your arm is 150 miles long.
No, it's true. For my book, I interviewed Bill Plant, who's been covering the White House for a long time for CBS, and he said usually requests, especially from Michelle Obama, are politely, declined. It's very, very hard. They're very guarded, especially the East Wing. And of course, my book is about the First Lady, so that was a very tricky subject to write about. And you see it with what Laura Bush did, and I think it's great that you guys showed that clip, because these women are so complex and so interesting, and we see this kind of just surface veneer of this, very prim, proper woman, but she was funny, and Michelle Obama is funny, and these are complete picture women, very intelligent mothers, wives, but also they had careers. Michelle Obama went to Princeton and Harvard, and I think we don't get to see enough of them. And I don't think, as Americans, we want to necessarily see them in their full, complexity. We don't want, what Hillary Clinton did with the West Wing office. It's for first ladies in particular, it's very touchy. That's why I think Michelle Obama probably won't say anything tonight. It would be unusual for her to do that. But it's a hard White House to cover. I was a White House reporter. It was very, as you know, very tricky to get answers. And I think they can kind of go around the traditional media in a way. They can use Twitter, Facebook. They don't have to work with the media in the way they used to.
I think Michelle Obama is consistently funny on Jimmy Fallon. Her whole Get Healthy campaign. I think she's done incredible things. So maybe she doesn't speak at this, but I think she has consistently been amazingly hilarious.
But that's not us. That's not the press. That's a different audience. Those are different people asking the questions. You've worked in the White House right now. What is? I think. Does this White House view the press as a necessary evil?
Well, look, absolutely. I think that that's the blocking and tackling of communicating the president's message. But I think, this White House is just smarter about reaching the people where they are.
Right.
And to be honest, nothing against journalists, nothing against the people in that room. But, C-SPAN's ratings are going to go sky high today, and that's awesome. But Michelle Obama is reaching millions of people on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, in a variety of different platforms, and you don't need that room.
Yeah. Kids under 30 don't own TVs.
That's right.
They're looking at their hands, they're looking at YouTube, they're looking at a lot of different ways to get information, and so as you watch things happen, sadly, everybody, there's a whole different way of getting information, and I think when we think of traditional media, I think that young folks go, that's not my gig.
Right.
That's my mom's gig.
Scary. The White House Correspondents Association, all those reporters up on the dais, their whole job is about access and making sure more reporters and journalists get into the room with the president, and credentials are given out, and that's something they're very concerned about, especially with the President Trump, potentially. And it's important that the traditional media is given the same level of respect, I think.
That's Gabrielle Union right there, I believe, one of the stars of the best cheerleading movies ever made. Bring it on. I think we can all agree there. Joe Biden was working the room moments ago, has never been in a cheerleading movie, but we're just a sense of the different people in the room right now. All right, Wolf
Reince
Blitzer
Priebus.
and
Never
Reince
done it.
Priebus right
Really,
there.
really.
With
There's
Wolf.
a lot of power there. Reince Priebus, chairman of the Republican Party. Wolf Blitzer, chairman of the world. All right, guys, stick around. We got a lot more show to go tonight. It's not just TV, as we've been saying. Now there's YouTube, there's Twitter. Zach Galifianakis, one of our guys here, knows a little bit about that. A look at how President Obama has had to bring the funny for a generation of people who look at their phones instead.